So me, I'm reading, right? I'm reading, and then I'm just like, no, ma'am. No, ma'am. Not to my favorite character. We ain't gonna do that. But best believe, Mr. Dici did do that. Hi everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel called Radi Reads. This is basically a book vlog. So what I do in these videos is I take a book that I've read, that I really enjoyed, or maybe I didn't enjoy. I start off with giving you facts about the book, when it was published, who it was published by, stuff like that. Then I give you a brief reasoning as to why I decided to read the book. After that, I give you a summary on what the book is about. No spoilers, it's pretty brief, but a little bit more extensive than what the blurb at the back of the book would tell you. Yes, it is called a blurb, and yes, I do love that word. Blurb, 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 blurb. Anyway, after that, we get into the spoiler section. First few segments do not contain any spoilers. I will make it abundantly clear. But like I said, if you haven't read the book and you want to read it, then at the point where I say spoilers from here on out, just pause the video, buy yourself a copy, read the book, love the book, hate the book, either way. Then once you're done with the book, you get back here and you watch the rest of my video where I go into more details. So after the brief summary with no spoilers, I then break the entire book down. So I give you an extensive plot summary of what happened with spoilers. Then I move on to who my favorite and least favorite characters in the book were. I tell you why that was the case. Following that, we move on to certain events that occurred in the book, why I think they were significant and important in the development of the characters, the book. I then rate the book, I give it a score out of 10. I also tell you why I gave the certain book that score, and then we end off with future recommendations, books that you want to read. So because I'm quite a goofy person, I thought why not zhuzh this up a little bit, and each segment has its own name. It will pop up here, but I will again briefly explain what the segment is. There are timestamps, so if you're looking for a certain part of the video, please go wild. Get some popcorn, get ready, we're gonna be here a while. Have fun with it, listen. Please, if you like what you see, hit the subscribe button, like the video, comment please. I'd love to hear your thoughts, especially if I say something or I have an opinion on a character or a certain event in the book that you don't necessarily agree with. Let me know, I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions. So the book that I've chosen today is called Half of a Yellow Sun by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. We start off with a little segment called Nothing But the Facts. So why is it called that? It's called that because in this part of the video, I basically tell you only facts. There's no opinion, there's no debate. The title of the book is the title of the book, you know? The book is called Half of a Yellow Sun. It was written by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. She is a Nigerian author. The book was published in 2006, and at the time it was her second novel. Since then she has released other publications, also very good, so highly recommend reading some of her other publications. The book is fiction. It's a novel. More specifically, it's historical or political fiction. The book is around 440, 50 pages. My copy is around 430, I think, but I'd say, yeah, ballpark figure 440, 450 pages, which for me personally, I would classify that as a medium length read. I think anything less than 300 pages is a short read, and anything over 550, 600 pages, I think is now a long read. You can get a copy for 12 to 14 euros, depending where you get it from, which again, I think is a reasonable amount, especially for such a gorgeous baby as this one. Last fact to give you, some people find it interesting to know why a book is called what it's called. Why is it called Half of a Yellow Sun? So the book is set in Nigeria during the Nigerian Civil War, and at the time a certain region in Nigeria became an own independent state called Biafra, and on the Biafran flag there is half of a yellow sun. That yellow sun represented hope and faith for a brighter future for many of the people who lived during the war, and yeah, that's kind of where the name of the novel comes from. Moving on, in this section I basically briefly explain to you why I chose to read this book. So usually, however, this case is an exception. Usually when I choose to read a book, when I'm online shopping, the cover needs to draw me. That's the first thing I'll look at. If the cover has me, then great, read the blurb. After that, I'll decide on whether I want to buy the book or not. But this time that wasn't the case. So why did I choose to read this book if I didn't like the cover? Just to clarify, I love this cover. There's yellow and orange. Yellow is my favorite color, so I am biased to that. However, I didn't actually know how the book would look. I just ordered it. Why did I just order a book? Because when I was in grade 12 in English, Americana by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie was our prescribed novel, and I absolutely loved that book. I thought it was so good. And then over the summer, I thought to myself, well, I really want to get back into reading, so what should I read? And then I remembered how much I loved Americana, and I was like, well, let me try another one of her novels. And yeah, decided to read half of A Yellow Sun, and boy oh boy, can I just say, no mistake did I make in buying this baby. Trust me, it's very good. So that's the reason as to why I chose this book. I knew a bit about Adichie, I knew the quality of her books, so wanted to read something else by her. So what's the tea, baby? So in this section, I give you a little bit of a more extensive indication on what the book is about than the blurb at the back of the book would tell you. There are no spoilers in this part of the video, so you're still safe to watch. So the book is basically set in Nigeria in the early and late 60s. It's set before and during the Nigerian Civil War. The Nigerian Civil War started in the late 60s, and we basically follow the lives of 5 main characters. Okay, so we have Odenibo, Uwu, Olana, Richard, and Kainene. So who are all of them? Uwu is a 13-year-old boy. He lives in a village and he moves to Nsuga to become a houseboy for Odenibo. Odenibo is an intellect and a lecturer at Nsuga University. He's very passionate about topics such as politics and education. He has a lover called Olana. Olana has recently moved back to Nigeria upon finishing her studies in the UK. She has a twin sister called Kainene. However, Olana has always been viewed as the prettier of the two sisters, the more attractive one, the sister that everyone wants. And because of that, Kainene is a lot more closed, reserved. She's more timid, doesn't speak as much. Kainene runs the father's business in Port Harcourt. The family is pretty wealthy because their father is a chief. And then lastly, we have Richard. He is an Englishman who came to Nigeria because of his love for Igbo artwork. He's fascinated by it. He wants to learn more about that. And he also works as a lecturer at Nsuga University. Basically, how the rest of the novel fans out is we follow their lives and how they change and transition before and during the war. So the book starts before the war, then some spicy stuff starts happening. Then the war escalates, so tensions rise between the country, but tensions also rise between the characters. So best believe it is a very spicy book. The reason as to why it's a political or historical novel is due to the fact that it is set during a war, and the war plays a big part in how their lives are affected and how their personalities and their characters are tested. Alright, so we now get to the big moment. So from here on out, there will be spoilers. So please, if up until this point you've enjoyed what you've heard, like, subscribe, comment, do what you gotta do, support, really appreciate it. And from here on in, there will be spoilers. So if you want, stop my video, add it to your watch later, and you better come back and watch it. You better. When that check comes, as Cardi B would say, you better. But anyway, so we now move into the full 411. This is where I give you a much more extensive plot summary with spoilers. So yeah, now's the moment when you can stop the video, read the book, and then get back to it. Or if you're really enjoying this video and you just, you're dying to know what happens to these 5 characters, then keep watching. Keep watching my video, because best believe, it's so generous of me. I will sum everything up for you. Then you wouldn't even have to read the book. The point is to, try to get you reading, but if you just want to keep watching, I appreciate that. You do you, and yeah. In this section, I give you a full extensive rundown on what happens in the book. The book is set in 4 parts. Parts 1 and 3 are set in the early 60s, and then parts 2 and 4 are set in the late 60s. Okay, so parts 1 and 3 are before the war. Part 3 leads up to just when the war is starting to escalate, and then parts 2 and 4 are we're now well into the war. So part 1, early 60s. One basically gives us a full background check on who the characters are, where they are in their lives when the story starts. So very similar to what I mentioned and described in What's the Tea, Baby? We have 5 main characters: Olana, Odenibo, Uwu, Richard, and Kainene. The book is narrated through the perspective of 3 main characters in the 3rd person. So it's narrated through the perspective of Uwu, Olana, and Richard. So technically there are no narrations by Odenibo and Kainene. However, I personally think they are equally as important main characters as the other 3 characters. So the book starts with Uwu traveling from his home village to Nsuga to work for Odenibo as his houseboy. Odenibo, he's an intellect, he's a lecturer at Nsuga University. He's passionate about topics such as education and politics. He has these weekly gatherings, dinners with his colleagues where they debate and argue and discuss the political position of the country, the government, the ministers. Odenibo then then discovers that Uwu has not been going to school. So Odenibo decides that he will teach Uwu how to read and write. Odenibo has this huge collection of books in his studies, and he finds education something that every person should have. So he takes it upon himself to teach Uwu how to read and write when Uwu is not cleaning and cooking and doing the house chores. At this point, we learn that Olana, who is Odenibo's lover, she was in the UK studying and she's just finished getting a degree in sociology. So she will now move back home and she will move in with Odenibo. And at first, U was like, I don't think so. He doesn't say any of that, obviously, because if he were to say that, well, best believe Odenibo would be like, get out of here. There's the door. Don't let it hit you on the way out. Okay? Okay. But he's threatened by it because he likes the relationship that is being formed with Odenibo, and he's scared that Olana coming in here might take the attention away from him, which, I mean, that's a safe argument. Like, obviously, if your girlfriend is going to come and live with you, then yes, houseboy will be moved out of the equation. So he feels threatened by Olana is basically what I'm trying to say. However, she does move in, and over time he learns to love her as well. At this point in time, we see that Kainene lives in Port Harcourt, where she runs the family business. So her father is a chief, which means they are pretty good upper class citizens. She's very reserved, calm, cool, but also cold. You know, she really doesn't give much away. And she meets Richard, the Englishman who came to Nigeria because of his love of artwork. Richard also works at Nsuga University. Kainene and Richard meet at these drinks and he is enthralled by her. Not Olana, Kainene. Because most people love Olana, but no, not Richard. He's like, I like the other sister. I want the other sister. At this point, Kainene is like, oh, I see. Mans is after me, he ain't after you, Olana. Okay? Okay. And basically what happens is Richard and Kainene start a romantic relationship. He travels back and forth from Nsuga to Port Harcourt. She's in Port Harcourt for the business. Obviously, he lectures and teaches at Nsuga University. Part 1 basically gives us the foundation on who the characters are and how they are connected to one another. So as you can see, all 5 characters are somehow connected to one another, which I don't know about you, but whenever I watch a movie where it's like this guy is this chick's brother and then that chick's brother is this person's aunt, and then that person's aunt is this guy's boyfriend, and then all of a sudden everything comes together. I love movies like that, and even more books like that. So in this case, obviously they know and we know that they know each other. It's not like in those movies where in one significant scene you find out like, oh snap, so like they're all connected in one way or another, but they didn't know. It ain't like that, but it's still very juicy. Moving on to part 2. So part 2 is now the late 60s, and in this part what Adichie does so cleverly is she gives us a couple of outcomes from events, but we don't quite know the context of why this has happened. So we know that Richard and Odenibo no longer speak. Richard was a regular guest to Odenibo's dinners with the colleagues. So we're like, so why is Richard not coming anymore? So that's the first thing where we're like, question. The second thing where we're like, question, is that Olana and Kainene no longer speak. Now they already had a tense relationship, so to speak, growing up, because Olana low-key knew that people would always look at her and not Kainene, but now they don't speak, period. We're like, oh, why is that? And then we also find out that Odenibo and Olana have a child called Chiamaka, but they only refer to her as baby. Like, why do they call her baby and not Chiamaka? Furthermore, this part of the book, the violence has now started to escalate. So what violence am I talking about? So at this time in Nigeria, there was a lot of civil unrest between the Igbos and the Hausas. So there's a lot of tension between them. And an important point that I do want to make and remember it is I personally think that the degree of severity of the war indicates the degree of severity of the characters in the sense of how their relationships and their strengths and weaknesses are truly tested. So basically what I'm trying to say, the more severe the war is, the more the characters are tested in their relationships with one another and with themselves. Okay? At this point in the novel, Olana goes to visit her aunt and uncle in Kado. She's much closer with her aunt and uncle than she is with her own parents. She actually views her aunt and uncle as more parental figures as her own parents. And when she walks into the house, she sees that they have been killed because of the civil unrest. Another important point to make is that all the characters, the main characters in the book, are Igbo. Except Richard, his relationships involve Igbo people, so technically you could classify him as an Igbo character as well. However, we will speak more about that at a later time. So anyway, Olana finds them murdered, and this affects her in a very bad way. She starts having these night sweats where she physically cannot pick herself up out of bed. So Odenibo has to look after her, bathe her, clean her. Furthermore, as part 2 progresses, the tensions worsen between the houses and the Ibos, and it's actually no longer safe for Odenibo, Olana, Uwu, and Baby to stay in Nsuga. So they pack up the car and they head off to Umuahia, which is a more rural area, safer, because they're not in a city. There's less likelihood of that area being attacked. So at this point of the novel, Olana and Odenibo decide to get married. Now, why is that important? It's important for 2 reasons. Firstly, Olana was scared to get married to Odenibo because she was afraid that them getting married could affect their relationship, because she loves the place in which they are at in their relationship. And she's scared that making it so formal by putting the marriage label on it could affect it. She was basically scared to put a ring on that finger. Okay, that's basically what was happening. And the second reason as to why it's significant is that they decide to get married during a war. Literally on their wedding day, as they get married, bombs start going off, there's shrapnel flying. Some of the people at the wedding literally die. You might be asking, why decide to get married during a war? Because she realized that life is a privilege, you can't take anything for granted, and she actually didn't want to waste time. So they decide to get married, and that's how part 2 comes to an end. Okay, so in part 3, we're now back to the early 60s, and in this part, we get a lot of context on everything that happened in part 2. So remember, we had 3 questions. Richard and Odenibo no longer speak. Kainene and Olana no longer speak, and Olana and Odenibo have had a child. Let's tackle what happened. Basically, Olana had to go back to the UK just to finalize some things with her degree. And while she was away, Odenibo cheated on her with his mother's house girl, Amala. And you're like, now wait, Radi. This just sounds like a mess and a half. Yes, it does sound like a mess and a half, and yes, it is a mess and a half. So anyways, Olana comes back, right? She can see the guilt all over Odenibo's face. She's like, what did you do? And he tells her. This girl, she gets so mad, she gets so drunk. What does she end up doing? She ends up sleeping with Richard in retaliation. And now you're like, hold on 1 second. Are you telling me it's the same Richard, Kainene's Richard? Yes! Kainene's Richard. Olana went and slept with her sister's boyfriend. I'm just like, girl. No ma'am. But yes ma'am, she did do that. She did do that. So then ultimately, the truth comes out. So Kainene is furious with both Olana and Richard. She tells Olana, don't speak to me. Not today, not ever. What does she do with Richard? She actually keeps him. She destroys a book that he was planning on writing. Like the whole manuscript. Baby girl took that match and flame and she set it on fire. That's what she did. And to be fair, that's the least he should have gotten. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying. Odenibo then finds out as well. So he goes to Richard's house and he's like, I never want you to speak to me again. Don't ever set foot in my house. So okay, now we've already answered 2 of the 3 questions. Why Olana and Kainene no longer speak. Why Richard and Odenibo no longer speak. But you're like, where is the baby coming in? Well, I'll tell you where it's coming in. It comes in because Amala, the house girl, ends up being pregnant. And she doesn't want to keep the baby, neither does her family. And then Olana says, we will take the baby. We will keep it, we will raise it. So technically the baby that Olana and Odenibo are raising isn't theirs biologically, but it is their child. And that's basically how part 3 ends. We now have all the gaps filled in from part 2. So we move on to part 4. Now we're like full on into the war. At this point, upon going to Umuahia, they stop in Aba, where Odenibo is from, and he tries to convince his mother to come with him. The mother says, no, I will not come with, I will not flee, I will not run from my own home, I will stay here. They end up going to Umuahia, where Olana starts teaching the kids, even during war. She's like, you know, there needs to be some hope, some belief for a better tomorrow. Then we find out that Odenibo's mother has died during the war. Odenibo then goes into this state of depression. He starts drinking. He doesn't go to work. All he does is go to the bar 9 to 5. Working 9 to 5. No, more like drinking 9 to 5. Not a way to make a living. Hey, that's good. That's good. That's pretty good. So yeah, so Odenibo completely distances himself from Olana, his wife, his baby, and Uwu, who is like a son to him. Then Kainene has started running a refugee camp. She's still pretty good as one can be during a war. So she starts running a refugee camp with Richard, who she forgave, and he has stayed with her throughout this. Then one day, while bombs are going off, shrapnel is flying once again, Kainene witnesses her houseboy get decapitated. And at that moment, she realizes, you know, life life is too short to hold any grudges. And she decides to find Olana and make amends with her sister. Even though, let's be honest, it's the sister who should be making amends with Kainene. But anyway, she finds Olana at the community living in Umuahia. At this point in the novel, Olana, Odenibo, Uwu, and Baby have moved from a house in Umuahia to living in a communal area in Umuahia where the four of them share one room. They have common bathrooms. So Kainene finds Olana and they make amends, and Olana starts working at the refugee camp with Kainene. At this point in the novel, remember, we're now in the late 60s, so Uwu is no longer 13, he is now 16. And for him, it's unsafe to be out in the streets because if a soldier sees him, he can be like, we're taking you, you go and fight in this war. So the first time that they get him, Olana is able to come and save him by bribing the soldier. But the second time he is caught, there's no Olana to save him. So Uwu has to go and fight in the war as a soldier. While in the war, he's exposed to a lot of violence, a lot of killings, unnecessary killings. And him with a group of soldiers, they end up gang raping a girl at a bar. Uwu then gets injured pretty badly. And me, when I was reading this, I'm like, okay, he's dead. Like, he's gone. He ain't coming back. And that's what the remaining four characters thought as well. They also thought that he was gone. But actually, Olana and Kainene find Uwu alive at a hospital while on a run to the hospital to get resources for the refugee camp. Because the war worsens even further, at this point, there are no resources left to run the refugee camp. There are very little resources left. So Kainene is like, I'm gonna cross over enemy borders for a food run. Everyone's like, Kainene, don't be a hero. But Kainene, the hero that she is, she's like, I'm gonna do it. I don't care what y'all say. I'm going there and I'm getting some grub for these people. Unfortunately, Kainene never comes back. And yes, I know your heart is breaking. My heart broke at this point in the novel too, but she does not come back. So ultimately, things start settling down in the war between the Ibos and the Hausas. So Olana, Odenibo, Uwu, and Baby then head back to Nsuga to basically start rebuilding their lives, which have been completely thrown upside down by the war. The novel ends with Olana telling Odenibo that she knows she will be reunited with her sister once again. Might not be in this life, maybe another life, but she has hope that one day she will be reunited with her sister. I think it's a very bittersweet ending because yes, unfortunately Kainene is gone, but for the other characters there's hope and faith that they can rebuild their lives from the chaos that they were exposed to. This section is called the tops and bottoms of the book. So basically what I do in this section is I have two characters. One is the top, which is my favorite character of the book. One is the bottom, which is my least favorite character of the book. So I basically tell you who they are for me personally. You are more than welcome to disagree with me or agree with me. Drop a comment down below. If, for example, my favorite character is your least favorite character, I would love to know why. And vice versa, if my least favorite character is your favorite character, convince me. Let's hear what you got. Bring it on. But anyway, the moment of truth. My favorite character, the award for the top of half of a yellow sun goes to Kainene. So why do I love Kainene so much? She's just this cool, calm, sophisticated, strong character. Mentally, she's got strength for days. She's the only character, in my opinion, that did not show any signs of weakness during the novel. And some of you might be saying now, well, isn't that not the greatest thing because it's nice to see vulnerability in a character? True, but during a war, I feel like you need to try and keep it together, you know, as much as possible. Now you're like, okay, well, you can't just say she's strong and leave it at that. My English teachers back in high school, they would be like, if you're gonna say that she's a strong character, that she's cool, calm, and collected, you need to back that up, Radi. I'ma back it up with you. Here are a couple of incidents that happened in the book as to why I think she is such a cool, calm, and collected character. Number one, she was easily able to fool a Hausa soldier in convincing him that her and Olana were not Igbo. Like there, on the spot. Like, I'm sorry, but I don't know how many of y'all could do that. And you're also thinking, okay, why is that so serious? Because if he actually found out that they were Igbo, he could have killed them there and there. That's how severe and serious the war had gotten. To be able to keep your cool in a moment like that, well done, Kainene. Well done. Furthermore, she witnessed her houseboy get decapitated in front of her eyes, literally like 5 meters from her. That's scarring for life. And in that moment, she decided life is too short to hold grudges. She's like, I'm gonna find my sister and we're gonna fix our relationship in the middle of a war, you know? And she did that. I'm like, yes, girl, you do that. You know, not many people would have been able to do that because what did Olana do? She slept with her sister's boyfriend. Like, I'm sorry, but if it were me, I'd be like, war nothing. Like, she can rot you know where for all I care. Hey, that rhymed. Furthermore, during a war, when everyone is struggling to make ends meet, this girl's like, nah, it's okay. I must start a refugee camp for people who don't have a place to sleep, who don't have anything to eat, who don't have anything to wear, and I'm gonna give back to them during a war. During a war. Girl. Yes. Yes. Like seriously. I mean, that's as selfless as it gets, if you ask me. Not only has she now started a refugee camp, but she's like, we're running out of resources. I'm gonna risk my life to go over enemy lines to get food and other resources. And everyone was like, no, Kainene, don't be a hero. But she was. She never came back, obviously, but that's the kind of person she was. She was not afraid. She was never scared. She knew that that's what she wanted to do. Now, some of you might be screaming at the screen, but now that was just plain stupid of her. Maybe it was stupid. Maybe it was courageous. You could argue both ways on that. I'm gonna go with the courageous way on this one. The last point I would like to make about Kainene, and this is also a bit of a controversial one, which you could debate either way, is the fact that she decided to stay with Richard after he cheated on her with Olana. Or Olana cheated on Odenibo. Call her what you want. There was a lot of cheating going on during that part of the novel. Some of you will say, how stupid of her to keep this guy. Like, maybe that was a sign of weakness that she kept him. But I'll tell you why I think she kept him. I think she kept him because her whole life, she had obviously been the invisible sister. Everyone was always looking at Olana. Everyone wanted Olana. And then along came Richard, and he actually wanted Kainene. And he made her feel special. He made her feel seen. He made her feel wanted. He made her feel important. And I think even though he hurt her so much, she was willing to forgive, but not forget. Forgive and keep him, because that's what she was very vulnerable about. That people didn't really fancy her or even see her, as a matter of fact. Well, Richard idolized her, and she was not willing to give that up, even if it meant the guy who idolized her cheated on her with her sister. Some of you could argue that that's a moment of weakness. Some of you could say she was willing to forgive him because he loved her so much. Was it because she was happy with him? Or was it because she needed him to make her feel significant? Argue both ways. Argue whichever way you want to on that one. So that's, I'd say, the only potential sign of weakness that I could really give her. Other than that, she was a badass chick. She knew what she was doing. Moving on to the bottom of the book. So who do I think is the bottom? The dreaded moment. The bottom for me was Odenibo. And some of you are like, Odenibo? Really? Not Olana? Yes, not Olana. Odenibo. Now I'll tell you why. Because I feel like Odenibo's character at the beginning of the novel was so strong and passionate and enthusiastic. And by the end of the novel, he just completely deflated. And by the end of the novel, he was this depressed individual who really, when it was time to step up and be a husband and a father and a role model, he didn't do that. He was out there, drinking alcohol. He didn't do that. He did not step up for me in any way. Not as a father, not as a husband, not as a role model, idol, call it what you want. Now, some of you are like, maybe you're being too harsh on him. I'm like, okay, but let me give you some perspective, shall I? All of the characters went through something horrendous during the novel. Olana found her aunt and uncle dead. Kainene witnessed her houseboy get decapitated in front of her. Uwu was forced to go into war at the age of 16. Richard, upon returning from the UK at the airport, witnessed a massacre of Igbo people. And then you get Odenibo. I'm like, what did Odenibo witness? I'm like, okay, yes, I understand your mother died and you blamed yourself for her death by not convincing her to come with you. And I can understand that. But don't shut out your wife and your kids and your houseboy who all love and adore you and want to be there for you. Don't find the answer in a bottle of whiskey or whatever he was drinking in the book. I don't know. It just, he gave up. And I'm sorry, but a character who gives up ain't a character who's gonna get the top of the book. Kainene never gave up. Well, Odenibo, I just didn't see it. I did not see it. Other red flags, even before he was depressed during the war. He cheated on Olana with Amala. That entire mess started with Odenibo. Had he not cheated on Olana, Olana never would have slept with Richard. So none of that would have happened. Olana and Kainene probably would still be speaking. Odenibo and Richard would probably still be speaking. Baby probably wouldn't have existed. Again, I think it was very brave of Olana to decide to mother the child, even though it's a constant reminder of her husband's unfaithfulness. It all started with Odenibo. And then he had the nerve to go to Richard's and be like, I never want to speak to you again. I'm like, had you not messed up, boo-boo? then you wouldn't be standing in front of Richard's door, yelling and screaming and being like, how dare you sleep with my, well, she wasn't his wife at the time, my girlfriend. No, sorry Odenibo. You have no foot to stand on. Also, another red flag for me. Odenibo's mother did not approve of Olana. And I'm like, okay. I'm not saying he had to be rude and disrespectful to his mother. Obviously, we respect our mothers, we respect our elderly. That's the culture we were brought up with. I'm not saying he had to be like, get out of my house. No ma'am, no sir. That's not what I'm saying. However, he could still put his foot down in a respectful way and be like, Mama, this is the girl for me. I love her. And whatever you do or say ain't gonna change that. He did not do that. So that's another red flag for me. This section is called Break It Down. So in this part of the video, I basically take a couple of events, significant turning points if you'd want to call them from the book, and I tell you how I felt about them and why I thought they were so important. So firstly, let's start with Richard and Olana sleeping together. That was just a mess and a half. I don't know what was going through their heads when they were doing it. No, I think I know what was going through their heads. They had one too many glasses of wine, one too many glasses, and well, it was just a mess. It was just a mess. Olana, for example, like I personally feel like she always knew that she was the sister that was put under the spotlight and on the pedestal. And you know Kainene is so insecure about that. The one thing that she has to herself, a man who prefers Kainene to Olana, I'm like, girl, you really had to go and sleep with your sister's boyfriend. And Richard, what were you doing? You know how insecure Kainene is about these things. And you preach that you idolize her and you love her and she's the one for you and you don't deserve her. And then you go and do that. Well, Richard, all I can say to you, you're lucky Kainene chose to keep ya. Because if it were me, I'd have thrown you to the curb and I would have had Richard 2.0 in less than 5 seconds. The next point I would like to speak about is the creation of Biafra and Richard. I actually haven't spoken too much about Richard. I think it's important to discuss him as a character a little bit more. So Richard always felt as an outsider because he wasn't there for the creation of Nigeria. Not to say that the other 4 characters were there for the creation of Nigeria. However, they were born in Nigeria. They grew up in Nigeria. They were Nigerian. Richard, however, he was born in the UK. He grew up in the UK. He only came recently because of his love for artwork. Richard had only come here recently, so he felt like an outsider. He didn't feel like a Nigerian. So with the creation of Biafra, Richard really hoped and believed that this would change things. It gave him a chance to be Biafran, like all the other Biafrans, because he was actually there for the creation of Biafra. And unfortunately for Richard, well, that still wasn't the case. This man, he tried so hard. He spoke fluent Igbo even, but at the end of the day, people still didn't think that he was Nigerian or Biafran, and he still felt like an outsider until the end. He would even wanted to write a book about Nigeria and everything that had happened. And then he realized that's not my story to tell, because as much as I want to be a Nigerian, he wasn't. I'm sorry, Richard. I do sympathize with you on that one, but he was not. And part of the reason why I think Kainene and Richard were so suitable for each other is because they both felt like outsiders. She had always felt like an outsider compared to her sister. Whenever her and her sister would be in a room, all the people would go to Olana and Kainene would be shut out. She'd be left outside the circle. Make the circle bigger? Not in this case. So I think they both felt like outsiders, very alienated, very isolated. And I think that's part of the reason why they worked, because they needed each other. And as a couple, they had someone, and they weren't so isolated and they weren't so alone. Olana and Odenibo's wedding day. I think it was very cleverly composed and written by Adichie. So they got married during a war, and on their wedding day, literally a few minutes after saying the I do's and putting the rings on them fingers, the bombs started going off, people started dying, it was chaos. Why do I think that was a significant part in the novel? Because I thought it was a very clever way of showing the ongoing battle between love and violence. The love and the hope is them getting married. The violence is everyone around them dying. And so I thought that was a really clever way of showing the fight between those contrasting themes. And the one thing that I respect respect about Olana's character is the fact that she never gave up hope and she never gave up on love. Those are two things that easily could have been given up on during such a severe and horrendous war. And it's something that I think Odenibo did do. He gave up on love and he gave up on hope. He gave up on happiness while she didn't. So I really think in the fight between love and war, Olana conquered. She was able to beat the war with her love, while Odenibo was not able to do that. He gave in to the war. He gave up on happiness, he gave up on hope, and yet Miss Adichie decided to go and do my girl Kainene dirty, while Odenibo still got to go home. Really? Really, girl? Really? And that depression and giving up of Odenibo's leads me to the next point. When did that all start? By now, I think you know pretty well when it started. It started when Odenibo's mother died. So when she died, at that point, he blamed himself. And I understand that. Like, you weren't able to convince her to come with you. So you feel like you're the reason why she died. You blame yourself. You feel guilty. I'm like, okay, that's the way you feel. I personally don't agree with that. But it's the way we work as human beings. We blame ourselves, don't we? So that's what he did. However, he had people who loved him, who were there for him, who wanted to help him through it. What did he do? He swiped left on the Olana, Uwu, and Baby app. He was supposed to swipe right. That's what you were supposed to do. But he didn't. He gave up. That was just very disappointing to see, in my opinion, because he was a character who was so passionate and had so much to give at the beginning of the novel. And to see him deteriorate into a character who had no will to live, not even for his family, it was very sad to see. And I pity him for that. The next point I would like to speak about is Ubu joining the army. At the age of 16, to join the army and have to fight in a war that you do not want to fight in, that must have been really tough. To add on it, while you're fighting a war and killing people, and to top it all off, him and a group of other soldiers gang rape a girl. And he has to live with that for the rest of his life. At the age of 16, to have to live with the guilt and the shame of having done that, that can be unbearable. To top it all off, after the war is over and they go back home, he finds out that his sister had also been gang raped by soldiers. He's no better than those soldiers who violated his sister's body. At some point, you have to accept responsibility for doing it. Now, I don't know if he had said, no, I don't want to. Would the other soldiers have killed him? Would they have bullied him relentlessly until the war was over? I don't know. I don't know. But ultimately, he did it. And he needs to take responsibility for his actions and accept the consequences. And I think ultimately he did that. Uwu became a very successful writer, which means he was able to move on from that. And even though he was able to move on, I still think what he did will haunt him for the rest of his life. The last part of Break It Down is Kainene's disappearance. So some of you might be thinking that it was so stupid of Kainene to, go over enemy lines. And a lot of you are probably screaming, now's not the time to be a hero, miss. And you're probably right. It probably was not the time to be a hero. However, it was not in Kainene's nature to just sit back and not do anything. That's not who she was. So some of you might think it's silly. I don't think it's silly, and I don't think it was stupid that she went, because the theme of strength was Kainene for me. The theme of hope and faith was Olana, and I think Kainene was the embodiment of strength and courage and bravery. So had she not gone, I'd have been like, Kainene, what are you doing? Okay, no, I wouldn't have been that critical of her. It makes sense for her to be the character who would start a refugee camp during a war, who would go over enemy lines and risk her own life to get food and supplies for these people. So for me, it was not stupid. It was incredibly courageous. And out of all 5 characters, if any one of them had to go missing, I think Kainene would have the best shot at surviving across enemy lines. Because this, brick wall. This girl had it. She had it all the way. She had it from the beginning to the end. It was always there. That mental strength never wavered. Not for 1 minute. Alright, so after all that, it's time to give the book a rating out of 10. The moment of truth. I give the book an amazing 9 out of 10. 9 out of 10 I think is pretty good. I hardly ever give a book a 10 out of 10. It really has to blow my mind. Best believe this is one of my favorite books. It really is. For me to give a book a 10 out of 10, it really has to be something where I can't fault it at all. Maybe fault is a strong word, but I would have liked a little bit more, and I will explain why I docked off a point and it didn't get a 10 out of 10. Why did it get 9 points though? Let's start with the positive, shall we? Brilliant plot. plot. Just, it had everything. It had the spiciness, it had the love, it had the drama, it had the ups and downs. Everything I would have wanted in a plot was there. Yes, Miss Adichie. Thank you. That was brilliant. The characters, they were gorgeous. There was so much depth and meaning to all the characters. They each symbolized something. They each played an important role in the progression of the story. None of the characters were one-dimensional. With every character, she was able to evoke an emotion out of me. Even if that wasn't a good emotion, like with Odenibo, I don't like the guy. But she still created such a good character that she was able to make me feel, not hatred. Hatred is a strong word, but a passionate disliking of the guy. So gorgeous characters, really, really well molded, well created. Furthermore, things like the structure of the book was sensational. Having 4 different parts when we jumped from the early 60s to the late 60s to the early 60s to the late 60s. I love that because it gave you this element of suspense. You kept wanting to know what was going on, especially at the end of part 2 when we had all these holes and questions in our minds and we wanted to know, wait, but why aren't they speaking to each other? When did the baby come into the picture? I thought that was very well thought of by Adichie. There were great details. There were no gaps in the plot. It flowed nicely. She has a gorgeous use of words. So I must admit, the way she describes is just beautiful. It's like poetry on the page. I love the way she writes. Furthermore, there was really good balance between description and dialogue because sometimes when I'm reading a book, there could be too much dialogue and not enough description or the other way around. So there's a really nice balance there. And lastly, I think it's a great read. It's not a book that's too difficult to read. It's very beautifully written. She has a very smart way of choosing her words wisely. It's so meticulously and beautifully written. Like you can really see that she took the time and the effort to really think about how to connect the words and paint this gorgeous picture in your mind. So for those reasons, the book gets 9 points. Why did I dock the 1 point? I personally would have liked to know what would have happened with their lives after the war. So if it were me, I would have liked a part 5 where it was maybe the early 70s just to kind of see what the consequences were of the war on each character. However, having said that, I do like the fact that we didn't know what happened with Kainene. Adichie's books always have these endings where she gives you something concrete, but there's also a lot left for your own interpretation. For example, with Kainene disappearing, I loved Kainene. So for me personally, like the girl will walk back in maybe a week or 2. That's probably unrealistic, but that's what I would have wanted to see. Some of you might have thought she died when she crossed enemy borders. Others might say she's still alive, but she's being kept across enemy lines. That's something I really appreciate and I enjoy, is an ending that can have interpretation based on the reader, which is lovely. The reason I docked that 1 point is I would have liked a part 5 just to have a bit more of a concrete idea of what happened to the other characters, not even Kainene. Like for example, Uwu, would he have spoken to someone about everything he experienced and observed and did during the war? What would happen to Olana and Odenibo's relationship? What about Richard? The love of his life, the girl he idolized is gone. Is he gonna leave Nigeria and never look back? Those are some things I would have liked to maybe have a bit of a concrete ending to, but I can see why Adichie didn't do that, because I personally think she likes leaving some elements and some parts up to the reader. Come up with your own endings. Some authors like doing that. Like I say, I liked the ending, but I would have wanted just a little bit more concrete details on what happened with the other characters. That's why I give the book an amazing 9 out of 10. Alright, and to finish off this video, there's a little section called Broaden Your Horizon. Pretty brief, but basically, if you've read the book and you've really enjoyed it and you want to read more by the same author or a similar type of genre, this is that section. Or if you really loved this video, well then, maybe I'll make a video on one of these book recommendations that I'm about to give you, and then you can watch that one as well. So please. So, some book recommendations that I can give you by Adichie are Purple Hibiscus, which is her first ever novel, published in 2004. Really good book, not as long as Half of a Yellow Sun. It's set during a very similar time as Half of a Yellow Sun, but the war doesn't play such an important role as it did in Half of a Yellow Sun. Another really good book by her is Americana. Like I said, I read that as my grade 12 English prescribed novel. Very good, set in more modern times, and that focuses a lot more on themes such as race, race and identity across different countries, not so much about how war can affect one's life. Furthermore, if you do want another book that is under the category of historical or political fiction, I would recommend A Thousand Splendid Suns. It is by Khaled Hosseini. It is set in Afghanistan and it basically follows the lives of two women and how the ongoing war and the tight regimes affect their lives. It is a very, very sad novel. So if you do not like sad novels, then maybe give A Thousand Splendid Suns a swipe left. However, if you do love sad novels, or if you just want to read another gorgeously written novel, I would definitely recommend A Thousand Splendid Suns. Alright, well that's been it. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, subscribe, comment, do what you gotta do. Please drop a comment. I'm dying to hear your comments, what you guys thought. Have a good day. Stay safe, everyone. Stay groovy, and I'll chat to you next time.